On May 1st, 2026, China did something unprecedented. It swung open its economic doors to Africa, eliminating all tariffs on imports from 53 of the continent's 54 nations. On the surface, it looks like the single greatest economic opportunity for Africa in a generation. A chance to finally rebalance a trade relationship that has been notoriously one-sided. But is it a genuine lifeline? Or is it a strategic masterstroke to kill what's left of Africa's local manufacturing and deepen the continent's dependency on Beijing for good?
大家好，欢迎来到本期视频。先介绍一下背景啊。本期视频的主人公是托辛塔伊沃，牛津大学 MBA 战略分析师，他的定位非常清晰，用逻辑分析的方法解剖非洲的政治经济。注意一下他这个牛津大学的身份，一般非洲国家的精英，他的背景非常关键。如果他是西方国家高校毕业的，那么他大概率就是非常崇拜西方文化的，而且肯定崇尚自由主义那一套，这很难避免，因为相对非洲来说，西方文明等级比他们高太多，所以他的叙事逻辑和观点大概率也是受西方思想影响的。这一次他要讨论的正好是5月4日，中国商务部一口气取消了非洲54个国家中53个的全部进口关税，零门槛、零壁垒，直接向整个非洲大陆敞开了14亿人的市场。一起来看看他都怎么分析的吧。
To understand the sheer scale of what's on offer, you have to understand the numbers. For decades, the story of China-Africa trade has been a story of a massive and growing imbalance. In 2025 alone, Africa's trade deficit with China hit a staggering $102 billion, a 64.5% increase from the previous year. Chinese exports to Africa surged by 25.8%, while African exports to China grew by just 5.4%. For every dollar of raw materials Africa sold to China, it brought back more in finished goods. This is the classic dependency trap. Beijing's zero-tariff policy promises to rewrite that story. By removing all import duties, China is in theory creating a level playing field. African entrepreneurs can now, for the first time, sell their finished products to a market of 1.4 billion people without any barriers. And the timing is deliberate. This announcement came as China was losing market share in the United States following President Trump's sweeping tariff increases, and Beijing needed new markets for its surplus goods. The question is whether Africa is the beneficiary of the release valve. And when you look past the headlines, you find a much more complicated and much more dangerous picture. Here's the problem. A door is only useful if you can actually walk through it. And the brutal reality is that most African nations simply do not have the industrial capacity to produce finished goods at the scale and quality that the Chinese market demands. Africa is caught in a capacity trap. Decades of underinvestment in infrastructure, energy, and education have left most of the continent unable to compete. Unreliable electricity, inadequate ports, and challenges meeting trade standards are not solved by a tariff cut. And this is where the policy becomes so dangerous. China is not just a market, it is the world's factory. It suffers from a massive problem of overproduction, and it's desperately seeking new markets to absorb its surplus goods.
But while China invites African goods in, it is simultaneously offloading its own massive industrial surplus. With the West raising trade barriers, Beijing is redirecting an unprecedented wave of cheap, overproduced goods toward the continent, a move that has already helped slash South Africa's manufacturing GDP from 24% to just 13%. In this new zero-tariff era, that trickle of competition threatens to become a final industrial death blow.
This isn't a hypothetical threat. It's a clear and present danger, and it leads us to the three major concerns that you need to keep in mind about what is really happening. This policy is not about altruism. It is about strategy. China is playing the long game. By offering tariff-free access, it is creating a powerful incentive for African nations to align with its economic and political agenda. It is a direct challenge to the United States and its African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, which has been the cornerstone of US-Africa trade policy for 2 decades. As AGOA falters under the weight of Washington's domestic politics, China is stepping in to fill the void and to win the loyalty of African nations in the process. From the strategic implications, we turn to the second takeaway, the practical consequences for the continent itself. The policy will create a great divide within Africa. A handful of more industrialized nations like South Africa, Morocco, and Kenya may have the capacity to benefit from the new rules, but the vast majority of the continent's least developed countries will be left behind. According to ECOFIN agency, structural constraints, including unreliable electricity, inadequate port infrastructure, and challenges meeting trade standards, mean that the benefits will be concentrated in the continent's strongest economies. The result will not be a more balanced Africa, but a more divided one.
And this leads us to the third and perhaps most critical concern, dependency. By integrating Africa into its supply chains as a supplier of raw materials and a consumer of finished goods, China could be locking the continent into a subordinate role in the global economy.
The Brookings Institution is clear. Unless the zero tariff policy facilitates genuine capacity building and industrial upgrading, it will simply deepen Africa's status as a supplier of raw materials, meaning the zero tariff policy may not be a ladder to prosperity, but a gilded cage. So what does this all mean? China's zero tariff policy is neither a gift nor a curse. It's a mirror reflecting the deep structural challenges that have held Africa back for decades. The continent's lack of industrial capacity, its infrastructure deficit, and its fragmented markets are the real barriers to its prosperity. Unless African leaders address these issues, no amount of tariff-free access will make a difference. But there is a path forward. By using this policy as a catalyst for regional integration, by building transnational supply chains, and by focusing on value addition, Africa can turn the tables. The Brookings Institution argues that Africa's most powerful strategic play is to position itself as a low-cost entry point into the Chinese market for global manufacturers seeking to avoid US tariffs. That is no longer dependency, that's leverage. But it requires African governments to act now, with urgency and with a clear industrial strategy. The door is open. The question is whether Africa is ready to walk through it on its own terms. Because if it cannot build its own industrial base, it will be forever reliant on others. A continent of consumers, not producers. A continent of dependents, not masters of its own destiny.
好，视频看完了，我们来聊几个有意思的点。第一，先说一下这个布鲁斯金学会什么来头。它的总部在华盛顿，是美国历史最久、影响力最大的主流智库之一。它的政治光谱中间偏左，跟民主党走得更近。布鲁斯金学会在对华问题上主张通过外交、规则制定等手段保持对中国的战略优势，本质上是要在竞争和接触之间找到一个平衡。所以不管怎么样，这就是一个为美国利益服务的智库，它不可能为中国说话，而是从美国战略利益的角度来盘算的。第二，中国对非洲免关税到底是不是好事呢？我的观点非常明确，这无论如何都是一件天大的好事。因为不管别人怎么算成本与回报，怎么琢磨中国的战略意图，免关税本身的逻辑是干干净净的。中国除了免关税，是真金白银的行动。非洲商品进入中国市场，成本更低，机会更多。中国为非洲企业打开了一个14亿人的超级市场，能做到这一点的国家，全世界找不出第二个。中国和非洲确实存在贸易不平衡，但问题是中国本身可以不开放免关税啊。正是因为中国是可以谈判的合作伙伴，这才给了非洲这样一个机会改善贸易平衡。你换成欧美国家试试，他们会来在乎你的贸易不平衡吗？中国对非洲关上大门的时候，西方说中国搞贸易壁垒不够开放；中国对非洲敞开大门，甚至零门槛，西方又说这是陷阱，要小心依赖。那到底中国要怎么做呢？这本质上就是西方媒体一贯的双标趋势，先把中国设定为邪恶的，然后你干什么都是邪恶的，你加关税是经济胁迫，你免关税就是经济陷阱，反正中国有原罪。第三，非洲需要换一种心态来看待中国。非洲舆论圈里有一种根深蒂固的受害者心态，这种心态的逻辑链条是这样的：中国对非洲做的每一件事都必须是无私奉献的，不求回报的纯慈善行为。如果中国从中盈利，或者符合中国抵消美国关税冲击的整体战略，那中国就是邪恶的，中国就是在利用非洲，这就叫新殖民主义。这个逻辑非常奇怪啊，扪心自问， 哪个国家搞外交、搞贸易是完全不考虑自身利益的？美国对非洲不考虑自己的利益吗？欧洲对非洲不考虑自己的利益吗？凭什么到中国这里就变成了一件必须被道德审判的事情呢？事实摆在这里，欧美几百年在非洲干了什么呢？殖民掠夺、资源榨取、奴隶贸易，与西方合作的结果往往是这样的：欧美投资了非洲，吃肉的是欧美，普通非洲人民连汤都喝不到，除了资源被掏空，什么都没有留下。所以到底是谁在搞掠夺？美国搞了一个非洲增长与机会法案，表面给非洲免关税待遇，结果呢，法案只延1年，附加一大堆政治条件，反复无常，最后还被川普的关税战给架空了。真正在非洲大陆持续砸钱修铁路、建港口、铺光缆的是中国。中资企业在非洲累计参与新建和改造的铁路超过1万公里，公路接近10万公里，桥梁接近1000座，港口接近100个。这些事实放在一起，到底谁对非洲的发展更有诚意呢？到底谁在真的帮助非洲呢？中国从来没有说过自己是来做慈善的。中国说得很清楚，互利共赢，我给你提供基础设施投资，你给我资源和市场，你有发展诉求，我有技术和经验，这是2个平等伙伴之间的交易。中国提供了机会，但能不能抓住这个机会，要看非洲国家自己的本事，有没有清晰的产业政策，有没有魄力去改善营商环境，补齐基础设施短板，培养技术工人。如果做不到这些，零关税的门开着，你走不进去，那该反思的难道是中国吗？非洲必须明白一个道理，从来就没有什么救世主，自己的发展终归要靠自己去努力。如果总抱着一种你必须无偿无私帮助我，否则你就是邪恶的受害者心态，那非洲永远站不起来。中国给的是机会，不是施舍，机会摆在这里，自强则生，不自强则怨天尤人。好了，这期视频就到这里了，本频道仅代表个人观点，欢迎大家在评论区理性交流和补充。另外，制作视频不易，如果您觉得做得不错，感谢您动动手指，一键3连。如果您有什么想法和建议，也可以在评论区告诉我，我都会看见。我们下期见。